Hi, I hope you are having an amazing day. Thanks so much for watching this video. Thought I would just do a quick one about where I get my book recommendations from. I read a lot of books, more so in the last few months than previously. I've always loved books, but it is hard to make the time for them, and I have just really been making such a huge effort in the last few months to read when I'm on the train. It's so tempting on the train, particularly on my way home, to just want to be like this, looking at my phone. But by finding books that I really love reading, and just by, not asking myself whether I feel like it, but actually just doing it, I've been able to read so much. And yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to share where I get my recommendations from. There aren't that many places, and there's a reason for that, which is that looking for book recommendations, we can end up with a list so long and it's so overwhelming, and we don't end up reading anything at all. So I like to have just a few trusted sources that I go to for my book recommendations. Of course, I'm always listening out for other recommendations, but there are just a few places. I'm really only going to mention three that I use for book recommendations. So yeah, if that is interesting to you and you love reading, make sure you keep watching. So the first place that I get book recommendations is from Tim Ferriss's podcast called the Tim Ferriss Show podcast. I'll show you it in the podcast app. So this is what it looks like. The Tim Ferriss Show podcast, and he is an entrepreneur. He did a lot of startup investing and was really into the tech world, but he has a lot of amazing advice to share, particularly around productivity, more so being effective rather than being efficient. So he really focuses on, are you doing the right things? He had the book, he wrote the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which I am currently re-listening to on Audible, which is really, he's got a bit of flack for the name because it sounds so gimmicky, but it's a really good book about productivity. And particularly in that book, he talks about as well, why do we live in a society where we spend our whole lives working jobs we hate, and then when we retire at the end, we've missed the healthiest, most active years on our lives. So he talks about having mini retirements and how to, even if you're working for someone else, how to essentially get yourself to a place where you can have long extended mini retirements throughout your career and really take control of your time. So I love everything he talks about. There's a few topics he goes into that I'm not that interested in, such as he goes very into the sports nutrition side, which I am interested in, but I'm more interested in psychology than any technicalities of protein powders and that kind of thing. But he has a lot about habits and routines, and I have loved him for years. So his podcast is probably my go-to place for book recommendations. I actually just had this sitting on my desk. I'm currently reading The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz, and this was recommended by Tim Ferriss. He says it's one of the books that really changed his life, and I think that was because he just read it at the right time for him. But it is incredible. I'm on my second read, so I did one read through just to get the gist. It's quite big writing. It's quite quick to read. So I read it through once, and now I'm going back, and I did a video on the system I use, but I go through things. This is for reflection, greens for reflection, or these that I'll go back and do the exercise or reflect on them in my own way. Quotes I love to do and book recommendations. So I do also like just keep a note of books that get recommended in other books. But he recommended this, so I am reading it, and he recommends a lot of amazing books, and on his podcast has a lot of amazing guests that are all very successful entrepreneurs or artists, athletes, that kind of thing, who are all interested in success, and not so much from the money side of it, but from the fulfillment and satisfaction side of it. So that is what I'm extremely interested in. So the Tim Ferriss Show podcast is probably my number one place I go to for book recommendations, such as this one, which is really good. I also use the Life Coach School podcast. I love podcasts. If you didn't already know, I just did a whole YouTube video about this podcast because I'm so obsessed with it. But this is it, and Brooke Castillo, whose podcast it is, she also recommends a lot of amazing books. They're all, again, around psychology and essentially a lot of personal development books, which if you haven't figured out, that is what I love reading. And also some business books. Business books are great even if you don't have a business that you want to start. So much gold in them. And one of the things I've spoken about a bit before, I'm not sure if I've ever directly spoken about it, but I do not discriminate when it comes to trying to learn. So like when I'm listening to podcasts, I'll listen to episodes on things that aren't particularly relevant to what I'm trying to do, because I think anyone that's successful has the same kind of ingredients, and yes, there might be a bit of technical chat, but most of it, I've got some amazing advice from the weirdest places and the weirdest, most seemingly irrelevant podcast interviews and YouTube videos. So I really recommend being open to getting advice from obscure places. Like if you are wanting advice on blogging, you don't just look up blogging advice. You can look up, so like all the advice essentially I've got about blogging, for example, hasn't been from bloggers. It's just been from the greater entrepreneurial world, and all of that can be applied to blogging. So yeah, don't limit yourself by only listening to people talking directly about what you're interested in learning. So Life Coach School podcast, number 2. And then number 3 is the Smart 20s community on Facebook. So my blog is Smart 20s. If you didn't already know, it's smart-20s.com. And I created a private Facebook community for all the women and girls and men, there are some men as well, that read my blog, so that we could all have a place to share our wins and our struggles and recommend books to each other and podcasts, and just have that supportive community. It's particularly for people who are trying to overcome perfectionism. So that's anyone who procrastinates, who has self-doubt. So most people fit into that category. But I'll show you what it looks like if I can be really quick. So one of the books I absolutely adored, which was You Are a Badass, by Jen Sincero. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but she has an amazing book, and that's kind of what gave me the epiphany to just have to log in to leave my job. It was recommended to me in this Facebook group that I created, which makes me so happy. Oh my god, I'm sorry to do this. Okay. I make the weirdest way to say. So this is what it looks like. There are currently 804 members, and you can post directly into, like, anyone can post into it. So yeah, I love that. But in that group, I had posted, hey, what are your book recommendations? Got some really amazing ones. I bought maybe like 5 of the books and particularly loved You Are a Badass. and I think there were quite a few people who recommended it and seconded it. So that is my other place that I go to for book recommendations. So yeah, I really recommend keeping a very short list of recommendations as well. As I was saying, we can tend to want to have a really long list, and we can spend a lot of time focusing on reading or like finding the right books instead of just reading really good books and applying them. And as I was showing you in this one, this is how I apply what I'm reading. So once I finish this, I guess I just had the option, do I want to move on to another book, or do I want to reread this one and really get everything out of it that I can? Because I found this book so insightful, I decided instead of moving on to another book, I would reread it and actually make sure I put things into practice. So that's why I'm doing that. So I think it's important to have a few really good places for book recommendations. Find a few people that you trust that have similar interests to you, that you would like to, like, you know, if, for example, if I recommend a book and you like, you know, you read a few of them and you like them all, or at least most of them, then maybe I become one of your people. I'm not saying that has to be me, but do you know what I mean? Like, find the people that you can relate to, and that their advice you like, and then just have them as one of those trusted sources so that you can actually spend less time looking for book recommendations and more time reading and applying. So yeah, I hope this video has been helpful for you. They're just a few of the places that I go to for recommendations. I will put the links in the description box below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post a new video every single day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!